Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something that goes way, way beyond the typical battlefield history you might have learned in school. We're actually going to look into a staggering financial mystery from World War II. We're talking about how the real wealth of a falling empire wasn't just destroyed in the rubble, it was systematically hidden right under the noses of the advancing Allies.
So, think about this for a second. What if the greatest treasure lost in World War II wasn't buried in some booby-trapped cave, but was actually hidden in a pristine Swiss bank account? It's a pretty chilling possibility, right? We usually picture the end of the war as pure chaos, frantic losses, crumbling buildings, complete destruction everywhere. But what if there was a calculated, highly organized corporate escape plan executing a massive transfer of wealth? Let's get right into it.
First up, let's talk about Section 1. Legendary lost WW2 treasures and the romanticized myths of missing loot.
These are the legendary physical treasures that have obsessively driven treasure hunters literally to the ends of the earth for decades now. I mean, think about it. You've got Yamashita's gold, which is supposedly booby-trapped deep in Philippine tunnels. You have the priceless fossilized panels of the Amber Room looted from Russia, and Rommel's gold, supposedly sunk off the rocky coast of Corsica. Then there are the 200 ancient Peking man fossils, Raphael's absolute masterpiece portrait of a young man, stolen from Poland, and the sunken gold hoard of the SS Minden. But here's the absolute critical thing we have to understand today. While these romanticized Indiana Jones-style losses completely capture our imagination, they actually mask a far more systemic and infinitely larger disappearance of real wealth.
That brings us to Section 2. The shadow power of Martin Bormann, the mastermind behind the curtain.
To truly comprehend that massive systemic disappearance, we have to pivot away from scattered loot and look at the centralized mastermind of Nazi finance, Martin Bormann. Let's trace his really stealthy rise to absolute power. He joins the party in 1926, and by 1930, he's already appointed director of the party fund. See, Bormann was a guy who deeply understood the quiet, unyielding power of money. By 1933, he's the chief of staff to Deputy Führer Rudolf Hess, and when Hess famously flew to Scotland in 1941, Bormann automatically succeeds him, gaining total, unchecked control over the party machinery. There's an incredible irony here, actually. Other flashy leaders completely dismissed him as a plotting bureaucrat, just a bookkeeper who preferred to stay in the shadows. But this so-called bookkeeper systematically outmaneuvered every prominent rival, from Goering to Goebbels, to completely control Hitler's inner circle.
It was Bormann's financial genius that gave him total power of the purse over the entire Nazi leadership. Take the Führer's Winterhilfe Fund, for example. He collected a staggering 3 billion marks. 3 billion! That is just an astronomical sum for the era, and it drew incredibly handsome interest sitting right there in the Reichsbank. He also set up the Adolf Hitler Endowment Fund of German industry, essentially forcing a collection of 60 million marks annually. Because he controlled the budgets of absolutely everyone, he effectively controlled the regime itself. It got to the point where even the terrifying head of the SS, Heinrich Himmler, frequently had to go hat in hand begging Bormann for cash to fund his operations.
As the Minister of Armaments, Albert Speer, emphatically noted, de facto, Bormann was conducting the internal affairs of the Reich. Bormann drew up the appointments calendar. Basically, if you wanted to see Hitler, you had to go through Bormann. This absolute, terrifying control over access made him the silent architect of Germany's domestic strategy and eventually its grand post-war economic strategy.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 3, the Flight Capital Scheme, born on August 10, 1944, at the Hotel Maison Rouge in Strasbourg. This right here is the pivotal turning point of our explainer, a deeply secret meeting at the Hotel Maison Rouge, where the true economic escape was officially launched. So the date is August 10, 1944. Now, Bormann didn't attend physically. He rarely left the shadows, as we know, but he ordered the conference. SS Lieutenant General Dr. Scheidet presided over a meeting of 13 representatives from Germany's absolute top industrial giants. We're talking massive corporations like Krupp, Messerschmitt, and Volkswagen Werk. And Dr. Scheidet delivered this truly chilling directive. German industry must realize that the war cannot now be won and must take steps to prepare for a post-war commercial campaign. So the crucial point you should take away from this is that Bormann fully knew the military war was completely lost after the Allies landed at Normandy, but he was fiercely determined to win the economic peace.
To pull off this massive pivot, Bormann initiated what was called the Flight Capital Scheme. And listen,
This wasn't just about moving heavy gold bars in the dead of night like you see in the movies. This was a highly sophisticated, systematic, government-backed export of liquid assets. Yes, we are talking about money and bonds, but far more importantly, it was the export of patents, brilliant scientists, and top-tier administrators. Blueprints and scientific patents for groundbreaking tech, things like advanced stainless steel, synthetic fuels, rocketry, these were deemed just as valuable as physical gold, if not way more so. The overarching goal was to place this wealth in neutral nations where it could quietly develop, generate revenue, and remain entirely free of seizure by the victorious allies.
Moving right along to Section 4, the post-war corporate network and funding the future in secret.
So how exactly did these industrialists execute Bormann's massive wealth transfer completely under the radar of the advancing allies? Well, during an afternoon session in Strasbourg, Dr. Basse of the Armaments Ministry outlined the exact methodical steps. Step 1. Evacuate all vital industrial material from occupied zones back to Germany immediately. Step 2. Form independent, secret technical bureaus in large cities abroad to securely receive plans and drawings of new weapons and research. And Step 3. Export capital via neutral banking channels. To understand just how serious this was, you have to look at the legal shift that happened. Bormann explicitly withdrew the previous Nazi death penalty for exporting foreign currency. Literally overnight, moving massive amounts of money out of Germany went from being a treasonous fatal offense to an absolute mandatory order straight from the top.
To build this covert empire, Dr. Basse specifically named key institutions as conduits. Neutral banking channels like the Basler Handelsbank and Schweizerische Kreditanstalt were explicitly utilized to facilitate the export of covert funds and quietly buy up foreign property using Swiss cloaks. This is literally the very foundation of the modern banking secrecy that still impacts our global economy today. Meanwhile, giant industrial cartels like IG Farben, which at the time had vast operations spanning 93 different countries, used their specialized intelligence branch, known as NW7, to vigorously protect patents and gather essential commercial data. This carefully structured web anchored a massive corporate empire deep inside neutral havens.
Now, you might be wondering, why on earth would these huge, successful corporations agree to such a risky, covert maneuver for a failing government? Well, Dr. Basse made the ultimate motivation extremely clear to everyone in that room. As soon as the party becomes strong enough to reestablish its control, the industrialists will be paid for their effort and cooperation by concessions and orders. It was a heavily funded promise of future power and immense future profits. It really makes you realize how modern corporate alliances and bottom lines can sometimes completely supersede national borders, especially during a time of global collapse.
Let's wrap things up with Section 5. Did Bormann actually escape? The May 1945 disappearance and the skull controversy.
This massive corporate subterfuge ties directly back to Bormann's own fate. After the fall of Berlin, what actually happened to the mastermind? History gets incredibly murky right here, and we need to look at the facts neutrally because two very different narratives exist. The official West German story claims Bormann died in May 1945 in the chaotic ruins of Berlin. In 1972, a skull was found near a railway station that matched dental records drawn up by his loyal dentist. But then, conversely, you have the Mueller body double theory, which suggests Bormann safely escaped to South America. According to this narrative, Gestapo General Heinrich Mueller meticulously prepared a body double using a concentration camp inmate. He allegedly had the victim's teeth horrifically and purposefully altered to match Bormann's exact dental work, simply to throw off future investigators.
Let's look at the anomalies that suggest he just might have survived. Bormann was last seen for sure crossing a bridge in Berlin on May 1, 1945. But more importantly, as we've just spent time discussing, he had already put a massive, well-funded flight capital apparatus and safe escape routes through Spain firmly into place. Furthermore, prominent figures like the famous Nazi hunter Simon Wiesenthal and the captured Nazi architect Adolf Eichmann both firmly stated Bormann successfully made it to South America. And what about that tidy dental evidence presented at the 1973 Frankfurt press conference? Well, it was actually drawn entirely from memory by his former dentist. On top of that, the skull itself was noted by Wiesenthal to have slight structural differences from Bormann's actual head shape. So, did the ultimate planner execute his own master escape using the very network he built? You'll have to weigh the evidence for yourself on that one.
Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought. Did the true architects of World War II's economic landscape ever face real justice? Or did they simply shift their wealth and their immense power right into the boardroom? The physical, golden treasures of war might still be hidden deep in the dirt, but the real missing billions might just be the very foundation of the post-war economic world we live in today. What do you think? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this leaves you eager to dig far deeper into the history they don't always teach you in school.